Okay, this is Chris DeSantis. I hope you're all well. And one last video on optimism today. And this is I started this by telling you where I started my journey with optimism. And this is sort of where I've gotten to, the final point that I've gotten to. Um, and it's a place that definitely when I started studying optimism, I never thought I would get to. And I'll explain a little bit of that. But what I want to talk about is how complaints can be optimistic. And as I said, I never thought I would get there because, quite frankly, just the way I was raised, you weren't supposed to complain about stuff. It was not productive. It didn't help the situation get better. And in most cases, it wasn't going to change the way things were going to go anyway. So I had it really hardwired in me that complaints are bad. Okay. And where I've gotten to is actually, I have an optimistic way of viewing complaints. If somebody's complaining about something, if you think back all the way to the beginning where I talked about learned helplessness, they haven't learned to be helpless yet. They still see a situation. They still want it to get better. Okay. That's at the core of it. Now, you can put all sorts of other motivations on somebody for complaining, and sometimes there are other motivations. But I think one of my tactics is always making a gracious assumption, because I would rather assume that somebody has good intent and give them the room to show me that than just assume that they've come at it with really bad intent. So making that gracious assumption and taking that complainer, this is a person who sees a problem. They want it to get better, and they believe it can get better. Okay, and that's the part you have to be able to latch on to if you're in a sort of a leadership position, because it offers you an opportunity. Now, I find often in times in my career when I was getting complaints, like I was just overwhelmed, and I thought, please, everybody, just leave me alone. Stop complaining. You're just sort of slowing me down or just irritating me. And I still run into that. But I've started to see more and more that there's an opportunity, first, for empathy with another person, to understand, at least, and take them on face value, what they're experiencing. And I think the most positive way to engage a group of complaining people is to invite them to be part of the solution, right? I don't think that you should just sort of tolerate people complaining about stuff and then, dumping it on you as a way of solving the problem. I think, though, that you should, again, make the gracious assumption that they see a problem, that they actually really understand the problem. And understanding the problem is really key to designing a solution. And invite them in to a process where they have to look at the big picture and help you come up with a solution, right? And so in that way, I think you can satisfy both the desire to not just let people sort of hurl complaints at you, right? They know that if they're going to engage in the process of complaining, they're also going to have to be part of the solution. And at the second time, you haven't just put the kibosh on complaints altogether. You haven't said, you know what, just don't complain because things won't change. Because if you do that, you are teaching people to be helpless within your organization, that sometimes they're going to come against problems and there's nothing they can do, or they just have to figure it out on their own. And I don't think that's a recipe for thriving in any kind of team organization. So, as I said, this is sort of the last one on optimism. If you've been listening thus far and you have some questions, I'm happy to answer those. Send them along via my Facebook page or leave a comment below. But otherwise, if you have suggestions about where to go next, I'm happy to listen to those. And I'm going to take a little bit of time and otherwise think about that and continue to update. This has been a great process, and I appreciate you all for being with me.